Okay, we're on. We're connected. I don't know if YouTube managed to get my thumbnail up. I didn't see it in my feed when I checked earlier. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Sometimes that happens. But it looks like people have found it anyway. So close to starting. Oh yeah, somebody's seen it. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's just didn't show up in my personal feed for some reason. Okay, a couple more people jumping in at the last minute. That's good. Someone asking if I could do a series on the 7 factors of awakening. That's maybe a good idea. I'm getting close to the end of this series, so I'll look for something else. Okay, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa. Okay, so we're up to number 9 in our series on the 10 Saṃyojanas, the 10 Fetters. Those are the factors that bind beings to samsara and are successively broken with the 4 stages of awakening. We're currently dealing with the last 5 factors that are usually called the higher fetters, but I think a more appropriate term would be the deeper fetters. They're the fetters that still remain even to the anagami, someone who's got 3 of the 4 stages of awakening. It's only the perfectly perfected being who is liberated from these fetters. So you can consider that all of these fetters are very deeply rooted in the psyche and are deeper, more fundamental to our samsaric existence than even sense desire or ill will, which are middle fetters. We've dealt with the 2 forms of the desire for existence, and with asmi mana, the I am conceit. And today we're going to talk about Udacha, which is restlessness. And as all of these 5 deeper fetters, it's extremely deep rooted in the being. So you're going to have some degree of restlessness present in the mind all the way up to until arahantship. It's not completely eradicated. Udacha Udacha is defined in the Visuddhimagga as follows. It has the characteristic of disquiet, like water whipped by the wind. Its function is unsteadiness, like a flag or banner whipped by the wind. It is manifested as turmoil, like ashes flung up by pelting with stones. Its proximate cause is unwise attention to mental disquiet. It should be regarded as a distraction of consciousness. This is a form of definition we find in the commentaries, that it always has this structure. It gives you the characteristic, the function, how it's manifested and its proximate cause. And that is how they define terms. It's a formal definition. So one of the points here that's important for practice is the last one. The proximate cause is unwise attention to mental distraction. This is certainly very appropriate to speak of in terms of meditation. And restlessness is one of the primary culprits in the disturbing one in meditation. Usually when a person is having difficulty with their meditation, there's all kinds of variations, but it's usually one of two broad categories. Either the person goes into dullness and sleepiness, low energy, or the person goes the other way into restlessness and agitation and can't sit still, can't keep the mind quiet. So it's kind of too much unbalanced energy. So finding a balance of energy is a key in meditation. And with a restlessness and this definition that we just read out, the proximate cause being unwise attention, ayonaso manasikara, to mental phenomena. This is another way of expressing that the mental formations that are manifested by restlessness, when the mind is lost in thoughts or memories or daydreams and can't hold still, the way to develop samadhi in that case is not to feed energy into those formations. If we pay attention to them, we feed them, then they keep multiplying. So there's actually two different ways of looking at this, depending on whether you're doing samatha meditation or vipassana meditation. If you're doing samatha meditation, the way to deal with mental distraction and restlessness is non-attention. You disregard them, pay them no heed, let them go away in the background and fade away, as long as you're not paying attention to them and you're not feeding them energy, even a negative energy of trying to forcibly make them quiet or getting upset by them, but just disregarding them, ignoring them, then they'll fade away from lack of energy. It's somewhat different if you're doing vipassana, where we're trying to observe all mental phenomena with the eye of clear insight. So you don't disregard anything that comes up, but you have to learn the skill of regarding it in the right way, which is dispassionately, detached, clear seeing. So also not getting involved, but just noticing and letting it go. If you take interest in mental formations, it just feeds restlessness. Restlessness at its core is a dissatisfaction with reality as it presents itself to the mind at the current moment. The mind can't be still and equanimous because it keeps shifting and moving and fidgeting. It keeps looking for something to distract itself. This is a restlessness. And when restlessness comes up in meditation, the way to overcome it is through stillness. This is very difficult to do at times. Restlessness often manifests something like the whisperings of Mara, that it's telling you, you need to do something right now. You need to get up and clean the cabin or go for a walk or read a book or anything but sit still. And you can even convince yourself if I just get this stuff out of the way, then I can go back and sit down and be still. But it never works that way. If you give in to restlessness, if you appease it, it'll just keep coming back again and again. The real way to get through it is to be still, both physically and mentally. And it can express in the body. This restlessness, when it comes up, you can feel twitchy and you really want to move. But it's best to restrain yourself from that. So this is quite opposite advice from when the mind is overcome by dullness or sleepiness. Then you shouldn't worry about being still or being too intense in your meditation at that time. You'll just fall asleep. What you need to do is to wake yourself up first. So then it would be good to get up and to wake yourself up. So this is kind of one expression of something Ajahn Chah used to, one of his common sayings was, go against the grain. And what this means is a good rule of thumb that works in most cases is whatever the desire mind is telling you to do, you do the opposite. So if you're dull and sleepy, the desire mind is telling you just to sit there and wrap yourself in a blanket and get comfortable and just kind of nod off. And if you're restless, the desire mind is telling you to get up and do something else, and be more active at that moment. And you have to recognize that's just a desire mind, and do what's needed rather than what's wanted. So restlessness is also, or Udacha is also, besides being one of the 10 Saṃyojanas, the 10 Fetters, it also occurs in the list of the 5 Nivaranas, the hindrances that prevent samadhi. In that case, it's paired with kukucha. So we have Udacha kukucha. Kukucha means anxiety or worry, the kind of mental agitation. So Uddhacca kukucha, because it has this kind of rhyming quality, of some translators like to translate it as worry and flurry in English to kind of capture that same verbal structure. So kukucha is in a way it's a close cousin to Udacha. It represents a particular form of restlessness where the mind keeps running loops of mental formations, often taking the form of anxiety about the future and running out scenarios and best case and worst case scenarios in the mind, which is all completely useless mental activity that doesn't help anything, doesn't go anywhere. And one aspect of Udacha being such a deep-rooted defilement, only overcome by the Anagami, or by the Arahant, only overcome by the Arahant, is that we should not be too self-critical about it. You're going to have some restlessness present for a long time, until you're completely finished the path. That's one of the signs of an Arahant, is complete lack of restlessness. But prior to that, there'll be some degree of restlessness in the mind, which doesn't mean we should succumb to it or coddle it. But people do tend to be overly self-critical, and just recognize that's a really deep-rooted defilement and something you can work on but you're not going to completely overcome it. You're not going to be utterly free from it until you reach arahantship. So it remains one of the fetters binding us to samsara, keeping us in existence. And it's related to the craving that occurs on a momentary basis as the mind craves for an object. That the mind takes the object, and there's immediately a restlessness kicks in, a dissatisfaction with the object, because the object is dukkha and anicca anatta. It cannot satisfy the mind, and the mind, being restless, immediately goes hunting, seeking for the next object. And that's the dynamic at the root of our samsaric existence. Mind craving an object, taking an object, being dissatisfied, and immediately craving another object. This is going on and on continually, and Udacha is part of that dynamic. So this is also how we make kamma, which again, we're going to be making kamma until we become arahants, because the mind is thrashing out of ignorance and restlessness and desire. It's thrashing out into the universe and doing this and that, creating ripples in the fabric of reality that then are felt in the future. So I'll stop the formal remarks now and answer questions. Let's see if there's anything already up there on the chat. Yeah, it looks like there's one. Jan, so it seems that restlessness is basically desire to become experienced. So intrinsically is an attachment to bhava. Is that correct? I don't think that's quite correct, because attachment to bhava is already covered by the fetter of bhavatana in the form of rupa raga and arupa raga. But I think, it's all related. And restlessness is not so much a desire for existence, but I would say a dissatisfaction with the current state of existence. How does the lack of restlessness objectively manifest in Arahant? Does it mean that there's no spontaneous thought? Can his mind be said to be empty? No, I don't think you could say an Arahant has no thought. It's defined as the Arahant only thinks what he wishes to think and does not think what he does not wish to think. He has complete mastery of the pathways of the mind. So if an Arahant wants to have a calm abiding without thought, he easily does it. If he wants to think about something, he easily does it. His mind stays on topic and doesn't jump around. It's interesting that it's one of the higher fetters, but I guess it reflects the basic desire to be something, anything. Yeah. Would it be right to see a commonality between restlessness and sankharas as blind movement, which comes right after ignorance and dependent origination? Yeah, again, these are all related factors, but it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same. Restlessness is certainly a factor in making kamma. Ignorance is given in the dependent origination as the primary or proximate cause of kamma formations, but everything arises from multiple causes. So restlessness contributes to it as well. There's ignorance. We don't really know what we're doing, and we're restless, so we want to do something. So we end up just kind of blindly thrashing around in the universe. Is restlessness the reason why an anagami still has dreams while an arahant doesn't? Yeah, that could be. I think there's some debate about whether arahants have dreams or not, but that could make sense what you said. Let's see. My teachers are strongly in the samadhi school. In the Vipassana school, is there any evidence that this approach minus samadhi leads to awakening? Well, that's the whole big question about the samadhi and Vipassana. What I could say, first of all, is that in the suttas, when the Buddha talks about a full path, a path to awakening, it always includes, or almost always includes, the passage through the four jhanas, and then the mind realizing wisdom or taking insight at that point. But he does mention, without expanding on it, it's one of those just brief mentions in the suttas that the commentary loves to expand, that there is one of the possible paths is the bare insight path. There's also in Abhidhamma, there's when the mind states leading up to awakening are described, it always includes jhana. Now, this is taken by some of the Burmese teachers like Mahasi Sayadaw, whose works I'm very familiar with, and he would have categorized his school as a bare insight path. This is taken to mean that on the way to realization of nibbana, the mind must have at least a single moment of jhana as prior to realizing nibbana. But that just comes as in Mahasi Sayadaw's model, that comes spontaneously as a part of the insight path. But going back around full circle, the most traditional approach, going right back to the Buddha, is development of samadhi, and then with the mind made quiet and malleable by jhana, one then takes insight. Of course, you can't actually do, this is another important point, you can't actually do insight while in jhana. No, this is the insight is then taken subsequent to the emergence from jhana. Okay, next one. There is recommendation in the discourse to meditate on peacefulness in order to overcome restlessness and worry. How does one do this in practice? Are you familiar with it? Thank you. The way to meditate on peacefulness is to find that, let's say the way I would approach that, to find that peacefulness through a meditation like Anapanasati, and make that kind of the emphasis that you're seeking tranquility, you're seeking peace. Just to meditate directly on peacefulness, which I would take that to be pasadi. To meditate directly on that is kind of difficult because it's like a quality, and it's a bit hard to focus the mind on an abstract quality. But you can find that peacefulness with a peaceful object, like the breath is said to be the optimum vehicle for overcoming agitation and finding peacefulness, because it's a very simple, inherently peaceful physical process that's repetitive and I would say slightly in itself. When it's observed, it's slightly on the pleasant side of neutral. So it it's not overwhelmingly pleasurable, but it's probably a bit more pleasurable than the dead center. So it's inherently pacifies the mind. In the light of recommendations to give dana with one's own hands, what is the technical view of anonymous giving or giving via the internet as an e-transfer? Well, there is the giving with one's own hand is a formal vinaya requirement for the monks to receive their food. It has to be offered directly into their hands. I don't think it's a general, and that's to make sure the monks aren't somehow cheating or fooling the system, so to speak. But I don't think it's really meant as a general rule at all times. And there is actually something to be said for anonymous giving, because it takes the kind of ego out of it. You're not glorifying yourself with the gift. Look how generous I am. There's a Zen story about polishing the Buddha's back. There's a big brass Buddha statue in the shrine room, and the monks once a week they come in and polish it with cloths. And some of the monks polish the front of the statue, and they like to make sure everybody sees how diligently they're working. But one monk goes around the back of the statue when no one's looking and polishes the back, and no one sees him doing it. And that's his humility, that he's doing the work, but he's not seeking credit for it. So I think there's something to be said for anonymous giving. Do you recommend the use of mantras for? Oh, sorry, the chat is so full it's hard to find. Once I have to scroll down to see the end of this chat, and I've lost it. Do you recommend the use of mantras for restlessness? Yeah, mantra actually can be quite effective. In Thailand, a very common meditation practice is to use the simple 2-syllable mantra Budo, 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 with the breath. Bu on the in-breath, Do on the out-breath. In other traditions, they like Tibetan tradition, they do a lot with mantras. We don't, in Theravada, we don't do mantras as much. It isn't as developed a system in Theravada, but we do longer chants like paritas and things. That's also a way of that can help to quiet the mind, keeping the restless mind kind of busy with that. But Budo is very effective because it's so peaceful and repetitive. What is meant by contemplation? What is the purpose of it? How do you practice contemplation? Contemplation, I would take it to be the Pali word anusati. There are certain meditations that are called anusatis, like Buddha nusati, Deva nusati, and so on, where it's not so much focusing on a simple object, but like the breath or a kasina, but it's using the thought process, using thinking to examine some theme. So the qualities of the Buddha, or the nature of the devas, and so on. There's a list of them in the Visuddhimagga, Anusati. So it's a kind of a disciplined thinking process. I see many Theravadins claiming that Gautama denied the soul and original doctrine. If that's true, then what could be the subject of detachment, wherein there is no from the aggregates when there is no self? Yeah, the Buddha said there's no self, so there's no soul, no atma, no jiva, and there is nothing that is separate from the 5 aggregates. It's just a kind of, your question assumes that is kind of what the Buddha would call a wrongly framed question, because you're kind of assuming that there must be something. it's like if you take the classic example is Melinda's chariot. You take apart the chariot into 100 pieces, and you don't find anywhere do you find the essence of chariot. But it's appropriate to call it a chariot when the pieces are all put together. And then the Buddha, not the Buddha, but Nagasena in that text, he goes on to explain that that's an analogy for the human being. The parts of the human being are these five aggregates, and there's no self, no essence in that. What can you say? What can we do about biochemical origin of anxiety? When I have a hot flash during meditation, it's preceded by a feeling of intense agitation. I've recognized the beginning of the process, so I grip my teeth to ride it out. But is there another way to deal with it? Well, I think you have to. I mean, this is again, it's going to be something difficult for you to work with because you've established this kind of mind-body feedback link already. But to assume there's an assumption built into your question. You're assuming that there's a biochemical origin to that experience. There's a biochemical aspect, but why not think of it as originating in the mind? And the mind is causing the body to go through that expression. Now, the mind does affect the body, and people who have chronic anxiety, they often get ulcers, for example. And it's directly the mind agitating the body. And it sounds like it could be a difficult thing for you to break and observe, because now you've implicitly or unconsciously developed that kind of a habit of this kind of feedback loop, and the feeling of it coming on makes you more anxious and brings it on. You say you grit your teeth. Try to be calm when you see it arising and just observe it without try to let the mind be tranquil and let the body do what it wants. And you may find that you can break that cycle. Could you please tell me what Sarvastivada texts are available in English translation? I'm finding it very hard to find information on Sarvastivada online. Yeah, the Abhidharma Kosha is available. It's a 5-volume set. It's a bit pricey. It's in English translation, and you can search for that and purchase it. I don't think I'm actually quite sure you won't find it online for free. That is, I think, the only someone, if anyone knows, they can put it in the chat if they know of another, but that's the only major Sarvastivada text that I know of that's been translated and is readily available. As in, knowing what we know about the purification that Anagami already has, restlessness is likely a reflection of craving some kind. What is this craving towards for mental experience? Yeah, I would say it's a craving that takes the form of dissatisfaction, that the mind is not at rest with the present contents. So the Anagami doesn't have any sense desire, but he does have desire for existence in the rupa and arupa realms. So that would mean desire for experience, as you say. So I think your statement there is correct. So non-returners can have restlessness about past and future, but not restlessness about sensual desire. Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct. Non-returners do not have sensual desire. Hello, Ajahn. Is the ideal state of mind somewhere in between dullness and restlessness? Yes. If so, what is the best way to find and maintain this ideal? Thank you. Yeah, I would say the balance, And a lot of the meditation practice, the skill in meditation practice, let's say, is being able to find that sweet spot, that balance of energy. And the way to work with it is the five faculties. Mindfulness is in the middle, is always, should always be encouraged, and sati should always be encouraged and nurtured. But the other two come in pairs, so they have to be developed in a balanced way. It's like when you're changing a tire, you do a little bit on each nut, right? You don't reef one nut all the way down tight. You'll just bend the hub, and it won't work. So there's two pairs that have to be balanced, which you could call the inner pair and the outer pair. The outer pair set the general tone for the whole practice, and that's the balance between investigative wisdom and or discriminative wisdom and faith. If you have too much faith in relation to wisdom, then it becomes like superstition. Like, people can believe all sorts of nonsense and really have lots of faith and devotion to, utterly stupid things, and get themselves in all kinds of trouble. So you have to have discriminating wisdom to judge what you're going to put your faith in. But if all you have is discriminating wisdom and you don't have any faith, that's like you've got no heart, and you become very cold and cynical and skeptical, and you never get anywhere. The two inner factors relate more immediately to meditation practice, and that is a balance between virya, energy, and samadhi, or the focused attention of the mind. And this has to do with what I said previously about balancing, watching out for restlessness and dullness. If you've got a lot of dullness, it can feel like samadhi, and the Thais call this state of mind bhavanga, which is a borrowed term from Abhidhamma, but it means something a little different in Abhidhamma. But the way it's used in Thai practice is a kind of dull meditation that can actually feel sort of good, but you're sort of sleepy and dull, that there's no clarity in the mind. It becomes sort of self-hypnotic, right? That's a kind of miccha samadhi, or wrong samadhi. And the other factor opposite to that is virya, or energy. You need to have energy and wakefulness and kind of brightness in the mind. But if you've got too much of that and no samadhi, then you just kind of flying off the handle. Your mind is spinning out of control, and you can't sit still. So you need to notice at any given time, which factor do I need to focus on now? If I'm too restless, and I really need to work on my samadhi. But if I'm dull, there's no clarity or brightness in my mind, and I need to work on my energy factor. And you bring them both up in a pairwise fashion, and have a good quality of both. But if you develop one side at the expense of the other, then your meditation is going to fall apart. And then you find that balance point in the middle, where it just carries itself on without a feeling of effort. Next question. Are you of the opinion that in jhana there is no awareness of the five sense bases, and also no mental activity, including volition? There seems to be controversy about that. Well, there's mental activity in first jhana. Contact with the sense basis is remote and faded in first jhana. Thinking entirely ceases in second jhana, and also separation from the senses. And that may not be absolutely complete even in second jhana, but by third and fourth jhana it is. At least, this is going by the the most traditional descriptions as taken from the suttas and commentaries. People have many opinions about jhana. Is there restlessness to wanting to attain nibbana? I have trouble meditating because sometimes I wish to experience samadhi and peacefulness. However, this makes it harder. Yeah, you get kind of caught in this vicious circle. You should have an aspiration and a goal, but then if you're too goal oriented, then it fouls up the meditation. It becomes another kind of corruption of the mind. I like to use the metaphor for this as like you're walking or hiking in rough country, like in the mountains or the forest. When you're doing that, most of your attention, most of the time, has to be immediately in front of you. Like, where are you placing your feet, so you don't trip over a root or stick your foot into a crevice or something. But if that's all you do, you'll end up just walking in circles. You need to, every now and again, stop and take your bearings and look at the sun and look at the landmarks and figure out where you are and which direction you want to go. So it's like that with our practice. The great a majority of our attention should be on the immediate present, what we're doing right now, this moment in time, without projection into the future. But every now and again, you do need to remind yourself of what you're practicing for. Traditional psychology. Yeah, I don't know if if I've come across any kind of formal discussion of that. It certainly would be, the closest I could think of would be just a lack of mindfulness, because some mental material feels like it's too painful to look at, so you withdraw your mindfulness from that content. But I haven't seen it really developed as a whole discussion anywhere. Restlessness is often referred to as one of Mara's forces. Can restlessness, as one of the last Saṃyojanas, be understood as one of Mara's last strategies to bind the mind to samsara? Yeah, I think that's what. Yeah, that definitely you could say that. It's sort of like one of his last tricks. And all these deeper Saṃyojanas, because they're more deeply rooted than the lesser Saṃyojanas. So you should think of comparing this to sense desire. Sense desire is very troublesome for a long time, right? And it seems to be the noisiest and most clamorous of the defilements, but it's relatively superficial. For an anagami, it's completely eliminated, but that still leaves behind restlessness, which then manifests as one of the primary defilements. Whereas in the ordinary person, the restlessness would often manifest through varieties of sense desire, right? It's difficult to separate them. They're all kind of tied up together. Can we see restlessness as the most basic form of craving? Perhaps I would tend to think bhava tanha, or the desire to be, is the fundamental basic form of craving. Can you direct me to writings that help with the complexities of Mara? Yeah, if actually, my book on cosmology, I've got a long section on Mara, and kind of pulling together all the texts about Mara. You can go into that. Biochemical interactions can be changed with mindfulness. I think mindfulness was the body, as the Buddha says. Yes, the Buddha said, in the Dhammapada, you never forget what Buddha said, that the mind comes before the body, like the ox before the cart. And I think it's a big mistake to kind of turn that around and think that the body is the cause of everything. Okay, some good suggestions about sources to read on Mara. I've had experience in sleepy samadhi. I guess the ground and the posture, and if the back has support like the couch, plays a role. Yeah, if you have trouble sitting cross-legged and you sit on a chair for meditation, um, my advice would be to uh, put something behind your lower back, like just above the hips, like a hard cushion or a rolled up towel or something, so that lower back is supported, but not the upper back and not the shoulders. And that way you'll have a better chance at maintaining wakefulness. How about volition? Sutras talk about intending to go from one jhana to another. How can volition be lost if one intends to progress from one jhana to another? Your thoughts? Yeah, Chaitanya. I don't. I don't think Chaitanya ever ceases, because it's one of the universals. It's associated with all states of mind. So there would still be some, according to Abhidhamma analysis, there would still be some volition present, even in the jhanas. To work with restlessness and its opposite suggests to me that the desire mind needs to be involved, the cause of these two extremes in the first place. Yeah, well, in one analysis, sure, like the desire mind is kind of the cause of everything, it's the cause of samsara. And in meditation, the desire would be either for ease and comfort and leading into sleepiness, or it would be for activity and jumpiness. You kind of desire distraction. You're bored. You desire something to excite and amuse you. That's restlessness. Okay, I think I'll make an end to this discussion. That was very good. A lot of good questions today. And next week we'll tie up this series. We'll do the last and the greatest of the fetters, avijja, ignorance.